Welcome, Section 31 Agent. It's time for the Star Trek update. And here's your host, Brian Sovryn.
Oh, the man of tomorrow, Brian Sovryn, is here for you for your Star Trek update, which actually, just letting this, we're going to get this out right out in the open. This show is going to be another show that is going public in the network feed that, well, it's getting a rename, much like the Star Wars update that Rob and I, my co-host Robin Freebeard and I do. And just like that, it's getting a rebranding, the whole thing. Robin, unfortunately, won't be able to be on this episode. Originally, we had planned for him to be on, but just my schedule, it was totally on me. My schedule didn't allow for it in the month of February. But we are renaming the Star Trek update into something quite simple and I think rather apropos, that being Sovryn Trek. And I think it only a fitting name for, of course, a network based around a show called Sovryn Trek. So why not get it a little more confusing and call it Sovryn Trek? No, I love it. Sovryn Trek, your monthly update on everything going on in Star Trek, or almost everything. But anyway, lots to talk about this month. It's been a hell of a month for Star Trek. A lot of news, a lot of announcements coming out. In fact, we'll open this baby right up. It has now been confirmed. We talked about it in January of 2019. There was who's Heather Caden, who is kind of a co-franchise runner, as I understand it, more with Alex Kurtzman for Star Trek in general on CBS All Access. She kind of let the cat out of the bag that there was going to be a season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. And we talked about it then. And now, actually, as of yesterday, which would have been February 27th, 2019, that has been confirmed that, yes, there is going to be a season 3 of Star Trek Discovery. And there will also be a new co-showrunner, as I understand it. Her name is Michelle Paradise. She is different from Heather Caden and, of course, Alex Kurtzman, who right now is absolutely running Star Trek Discovery. And apparently, as I understand it, Michelle Paradise came in about mid-season of season 2, which might be where we're at right now, as of last week's, episode of Star Trek Discovery, which was, what was that? Was that episode 6? Yeah, I think that's technically episode 6 of season 2, which was the first episode where Gretchen Berg and Aaron Harberts, the previously and notorious showrunners for season 1 of Star Trek Discovery, where they had finally fallen off the creative wagon, shall we say, where like their influence had finally been completely gone. Because interestingly enough, Gretchen Berg and Aaron Harberts, their names were still getting listed off through the first 5 episodes of season 2 of Star Trek Discovery. Their tenure is officially done. Again, they were ousted for varying reasons. There's a lot of different reports as far as what went on. I mean, like they were threatening the writing team, as I understand it. I might not get everything exactly right, but it was a very ugly situation. Admittedly, and I want to talk about the episodes that we've had so far of season 2 since the last time. We talked about the first few episodes of Star Trek Discovery that we'd experienced in the beginning of January, which was just the first couple of episodes. I want to review what has come out since then. It looks like as of this is getting released for patrons. It'll be released publicly later, but this is getting released for patrons on February 28th. And so have not seen the latest episode, which is titled Light and Shadows, which appears to be, if the episode trailer is accurate, we'll finally get to see Spock. I want to talk about all of that. That's going to be a major conversation around the past few episodes that we've had. But anyway, season 3 is confirmed. I don't know. We don't know that like the numbers or for either CBS All Access or whatever the viewing numbers are for Star Trek Discovery Season 2, whether or not these are worthwhile. I know there was some trouble where they released the first episode of Season 2 on YouTube, but then it ended up getting taken down. Largely, it seems, or the argument goes, is that might have been due to trolls voting it down hardcore, which is a shame because it was a fucking great episode. Like, Pike has been a real a boon for this show in general. So it's a pity if people are knocking it without actually even watching it. And I don't think anybody could argue that Pike and Anson Mount as Pike has not been like a real plus for this show and a real grounding effect for this show as far as being part of the Star Trek canon. Whatever canon that happens to be, if it's the Prime canon, Kelvin canon, or, Kelvin timeline, or whether it's like this. Well, then there's the original canon. I mean, we have that big argument that we've talked about. We talked about it on TIE Fighter Renegades, which is the Star Wars show that we do on the network. And we talked about it on a Wednesday, a Sovryn Trek Wednesday Q&A. We talked also about this argument made by Midnight's Edge, a YouTube channel. I mean, and supposedly by others as well, that this idea of the Prime timeline is actually like a third timeline of Star Trek canon. It's its own canon. It's not really what existed 2005 and previous, but maybe we'll get into that conversation a bit more later. If you want to hear a deeper dive on that, I got into it in a Wednesday Q&A recently for patrons only, as well as it was discussed on TIE Fighter Renegades, the Star Wars podcast. But anyway, suffice to say that this is going forward. CBS All Access doesn't seem to be going anywhere at the moment. We'll get into more of a conversation around that later. But let's talk about Season 2, shall we? And the episodes that we have really experienced since the last time we convened for Sovryn Trek. And there has been a total of 4, that being Point of Light, An O-Ball for Charon, Saints of Imperfection, and The Sound of Thunder. Now, I mean, on a broad scale, in general, Discovery Season 2 has been feeling a lot more like Star Trek. And a lot of these, out of these 4 episodes, many of them were very much canned. As in, like, they could, even though they had this running theme of, well, of all ironies to call it, the search for Spock, which is really what we're going through here. And they did have kind of the Red Angel theme sort of throughout them. A lot of these episodes could very much stand on their own. And Captain Pike, once again, like I was saying, is really a standout within these, where he keeps everything on focus, on point. I will say that all 4 of these episodes, everything that does seem to happen in them, though, does feel very rushed. And a lot has happened. Just to describe, in the past 4 episodes, Hugh Culver has come back to life. Yeah. He's come back to life. Okay, we got that. There is this, now they have this, after encountering some living sphere in space, the Discovery has access to this hundreds of thousands of years old database about the entire galaxy. Saru has gone back home and freed his people, on his home planet of Kaminar, which we knew a little bit about that from the short trek that had to do with, with Saru himself. Saru has evolved into like this next version of what Kelpians can be, and they are Kelpians without fear. I mean, like, there's so much to say that has happened in these past few episodes. This is a problem, and maybe it's only because the last episode is when Aaron Harberts and Gretchen Berg finally were off the show, as it were. But really, that episode was just the last, or the one where their influence wasn't felt, was The Sound of Thunder, and even that felt rushed. There's just so much going on in these episodes. And that was a big problem with Season 1, is I felt like it just all happened so fast you didn't have a chance to breathe. And you don't get a chance to breathe in any of these episodes. And my worry with that is that, in real life, you meet people like this, right? Who are just go, 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 go. They're always doing something, and they're always kind of talking, but then, there's never like a breather with them. And so you never get to really experience like the real them. And you might, and it turns out that a lot of those people are often like, they're just trying to, it's like an avoidance tactic, is to just keep going as fast as you possibly can. So you don't have to actually deal with real problems, or you find out that maybe they're just shallow. And, the corollary here with Discovery is that while I am enjoying the hell out of this show in a very real way, and there's a lot of really cool things about it, which we will talk about from these episodes, okay, there's the chance that it's very shallow and that there are a lot of glaring problems that they're trying to keep us from seeing because of the pace of the show. You know, and they are drawing out the reveal of Spock being in this season. They are drawing out way too long, in my opinion. I mean, way too long. That it should have already been there. He should already be a part of this. I mean, it's taking too long. So once again, I'm feeling like so far we're 6 episodes deep into season 2. So far, I am feeling like we're running into the same problems that we had in season 1, where overall I said, if you could watch season 1, and I've done this recently a couple times where you just kind of binge watch it, right? If you binge watch it, it's far more palatable. Okay, even though you don't get the chance to breathe, you're not waiting a week and getting what could be considered, for the amount of time that you invested into the show, watching it over months. The payoff doesn't feel as insignificant, perhaps, as it did if if you watched it over months. If you watch it in a weekend or in a week, then, the payoff's not as bad. And let's be honest here. The only reason that this show is being released on a weekly schedule instead of being released, the whole season being released all at once, like say Netflix would, is because they know that if they didn't do that, they'd have people subscribe to CBS All Access for like a week and then they'd walk away. I mean, let's be clear here. CBS All Access really should just be Star Trek All Access. Like, that's what they should title it, or Star Trek Plus, because maybe there's a couple shows, like the new Twilight Zone show looks pretty interesting. That Strange Angel was cool, but there's very little outside of Star Trek that people are really coming to this network for, in my opinion. So, yeah, I mean, it's really this, it's the Star Trek channel. And if Star Trek wasn't on there, or if there wasn't new Star Trek to consume on it, most people they'd likely just walk away immediately. Interesting to note, Patrick Stewart has come out about his show and said that it's going to be totally binge worthy. So I wonder if by then, we'll have more conversations about other shows later. I wonder if by then, that CBS All Access will have enough Star Trek on the network to where they feel like they can release, at least season 1 of the Picard show. We don't know if we're getting multiple seasons or not. I don't believe, or I don't believe we have that information yet. But, maybe then they'll feel confident that they could release it all at once. Or maybe Patrick Stewart is saying, no, you need to release it all at once. I really think Discovery is hurting by not being released all at once, because again, a lot of the complaints for season 2 is from a lot of other reviewers and myself, is that it's taking too long to get Spock. It's where if I watched this in a week, it wouldn't feel like it took too long at all to get to the point. They're relying too much on these twists, on these hooks where, like, these gotcha moments that they did in season 1, they rely way too much on these. And I've been with people where they didn't know, like in season 1 of Discovery, they didn't know where Lorca was going to do the turn, and end up being a Terran. They didn't know about the Ash Tyler Voq twist and everything. And when it happens, they're like, holy shit. But the reason that it worked for them and it worked on them was because, well, part of that actually had to do with that pacing that I was talking about, so that you don't think about it too much. And then you just didn't expect it, right? Yeah. The pacing is an issue with this show, and I think the pacing could be resolved. It wouldn't be so much of an issue if we weren't watching the show over months and just waiting and like, oh, come on, fucking tell us already. That's the problem. Even though these episodes, the 4 that we're concentrating on here, all of them had elements anyway, or primary elements that can exist on their own. They didn't need to be a part of the larger subject of plot of Spock and the Red Angel. Okay. Even though you do get quite a bit of that, you pretty much find out Spock has gone rogue. But all of that said, there's still some really, really cool shit in these episodes. I mean, and there really is. The evolution of Saru has been interesting. That happened in an O-Ball for Charon. Now, I will say there's a moment where basically Saru wants Burnham to kill him. by cutting off his ganglia and everything, but they end up falling off. They tried to make this really emotional moment. I don't know that moment was earned. Because again, we don't get the chance to breathe with these characters, so we don't have a whole ton of feeling for these characters. Okay? And so for them to have like this emotional moment between Saru and Burnham where Saru's like, "You're my family, Michael," and all this stuff, that it felt rushed, and it felt like you didn't really earn that emotional payoff. Okay, or that emotional moment, that being the showrunners didn't earn that. So that plays more into just the rushed nature of all this, where they just want moment after moment. They seem to have a lot of events and things that they want to occur, but they're not doing a good job of getting from A to G. They're not going A, B, C, D. It feels like they're skipping, and it does not serve them well as far as this goes. So, but now we have a Saru where, we don't know what's going to happen. He's like, I personally, my prediction is that they're setting up Saru to be the captain of the Discovery come season 3. I think really that's going to end up what's happening. Because Pike's not going to stay on board, at least I don't think, even though Anson Mount's doing a phenomenal job as Pike, and Pike is such a great character in this show. Lots of fun and very intriguing. And the acting is from Anson Mount is top notch. Acting in other places is, but whatever, it's there. So anyway, I think, and Doug Jones, of course, as Saru is phenomenal. He's a masterwork of an actor. So having him be your lead, I think is a very smart move. Having him become captain at the end of season 3 is a brilliant, or by the end of season 2 into season 3, I think would be a great move. So that's kind of where I'm expecting this to go, and which is why they kind of need the character to evolve, because who wants a fearful captain, right? Like that wouldn't make sense for Starfleet. Yeah, and even Saru knows that based upon in season 1 when he's asking, computer, rate my performance based upon the greatest captains ever, which of course are, like Philippa Georgiou, Robert April, Jonathan Archer, of course, from Enterprise. And, Robert April is the original captain of the USS Enterprise, the NCC 1701 Enterprise before Pike even, and so on. So anyway, now I want to talk about, we're going to get into Section 31. I want to talk about Section 31 here in a second because we get a lot of that. And we got some Klingon stuff to talk about. But I want to talk about on Kaminar, okay, particularly the episode The Sound of Thunder. And and in fact, I was talking to Rob about this when we were recording TIE Fighter Renegades, or as I like to call TFR. When we were recording TFR, he and I, before off recording, we were saying to each other, or off air, I should say, we were saying to each other, I was like, well, what did you think of it? And he said he was worried that they were going to make it so that the Ba'ul, who are the kind of the predatory species against the Kelpians, that you'd find out that they were really just the next evolution of Kelpians. And that's not what it ended up being. And he said he's glad that they didn't go that wasn't predictable and that they could still kind of surprise us. And yeah, and again, I think also it's easy to surprise us with the just wildly fast-paced nature of the show, which has its advantages, but overall I think is a negative. But anyway, yeah, I agree. I thought that too, that might have been a thing, and I was glad that it didn't end up happening. Now, a lot of people are commenting, and I instantly thought it, that as soon as they actually showed what the Ba'ul looked like, were just like these oil slick like characters, these black, like oiled characters, very, very interesting with like almost like these dreadlocks and everything. I instantly thought of Armis from Skin of Evil, which was the first season episode of The Next Generation. And Armis is the character that ends up killing Tasha Yar. Now, I would love it if you find out that the Ba'ul is Armis, even though Armis, like the way he describes what he is, that he is a leftover from, he's like all the evil from this race and they just like kind of left him there, which is a very weird concept around that. But that could be interesting if the Kelpians actually help the Ba'ul evolve into like beings of light, and they leave behind Armis. And that would give so much more weight to the death of Tasha Yar. And that would make that episode have so much more meaning if there was connective tissue with Star Trek Discovery, the episode being Skin of Evil from season 1 of The Next Generation, because it just kind of happened. Like, she just dies, and it's shocking. And in fact, you know what, really, even on its own, it's kind of a great death in the way that I guess maybe the Next Generation, well, it was, but I mean, it was just ahead of its time because, you know, like when Stark dies in Game of Thrones, in the first season of Game of Thrones, everybody's like, holy shit, they actually just killed off like the biggest character in the show. Now, Tasha Yar was not the biggest character in the show, but yeah, they killed her off and she stayed dead. And that was done decades before Game of Thrones was anything, you know? And so I think it's a win overall, you know, to keep that, but it would make a lot of sense if they gave that death. Still, it could have a little more weight to it. It can be just as shocking that a main character dies off and just dies, you know, and you don't see it coming at all. Just like what happened with Stark in Game of Thrones, but, you know, Sean Bean's character. But yeah, I would love for it to have a little more, and to have continued connective tissue to the Next Generation is a very, very, very good thing. Now, speaking of connective tissue with the Next Generation, I mean, to move beyond everything we found out with Saru and the Kelpians, and the Ba'ul, which, I mean, maybe the Ba'ul are going to end up being this, you know, kind of major heavy. They're going to be a major villain, going forward with Discovery. We'll see. It'd be nice if Discovery could get past going to war with things, you know, like we don't need another Klingon war or anything like that. But speaking of Klingons and connective tissue, we do get continuation of the story of Ash Tyler, and the character actually really makes a full return in a very real way to the crew of the Discovery. And I mean, I can't stand this character. I'm just not a fan. But you get in the episode, let's see, I think it was Point of Light. You get in the episode Point of Light, where you find out a lot about L'Rell's new leadership as the Chancellor of the Klingon High Council. And in fact, we see what ends like a hologram of a newly designed Klingon starship, which they call the D7, which is weird because there's some problems because they call the previous ship a D7 in season 1 that looked nothing like this. But the D7 in Discovery looks exactly like the D7 that, you know, you end up seeing in the original series, where it has that classic or what would become the Katinga class that you see also in Star Trek: The Motion Picture and even in all of the Star Trek series from Next Generation onward. That was cool. That was great to finally see that. Of course, we do finally see, yep, the Klingons have hair again, and there's that explanation that we talked about in the past that is kind of bullshit, but just a clever way to do it, that they shave their head whenever they go to war, blah, blah, blah. Of course, we know the problems with that because how come during the Dominion War nobody was shaving their head, etc. But anyway, that was a conversation we've already had on Sovryn Trek, so we're not going to go into that. But regardless, we do get some more about L'Rell and Ash Tyler. We see where they're at, you know, and what's going on with them. And of course, L'Rell is a very controversial figure on Kronos, which not a surprise. And basically you find out that the two of them, or that when Ash Tyler was still Voq, that Voq and L'Rell ended up having a baby. And the baby is also, like Voq, is an albino. Now, I had talked about, I said, I wonder if Voq is actually like the albino from that we learned about in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, that house, you know, that core, and the other Klingons end up going after, and Koloth, you know, from the original series, end up going after for killing their first sons. You kind of get a setup in Point of Light, in the episode Point of Light, where actually it could be L'Rell and Tyler's baby, or L'Rell and Voq's baby, that ends up becoming the albino that we know about from the Next Generation, or I'm sorry, the Deep Space Nine episode that features, Koloth, Core, and so on. I think that'd be pretty cool if that ends up being a thing. I was expecting that since the introduction of Voq. Like I was seeing that coming. But nice connective tissue with, at the very least, with Deep Space Nine there. But also, Tyler basically, through some machinations that end up happening on Kronos, and Empress Georgiou, or Emperor Georgiou, coming in and saving the day, who we now know, and we already knew, is a Section 31 agent. She ends up saving the day with some really badass technology, by the way. Tyler ends up joining Section 31. I mean, look, this is 4 episodes. Everything I'm telling you about right now all happened within 4 episodes. That's what I'm saying. It is so fast paced. There's so much shit going on. You can barely keep track of it. But anyway, he ends up joining Section 31, and he has the black badge, right? Which I still think is one of the coolest things, and was completely ignored after they were introduced in episode 3 of season 1 of Star Trek Discovery, but now they're back. Turns out those black badges aren't just badges. They are also comm badges, like in the Next Generation. So again, that nice connective tissue to the Next Generation. Not that Discovery wasn't doing that before. Like on the Shenzhou, Captain Georgiou, not Emperor, but Captain Georgiou had a bottle of wine that was Chateau Picard. They've done it before. But anyway, it's nice to have that connective tissue and to see it. And in fact, it's really cool because Pike, when he sees Ash Tyler like tap on the comm badge, Pike says, wait, what the hell kind of communicator is that? And which was pretty cool. So anyway, I liked the introduction of that. And anyway, so now with Section 31, we also see they have a very unique starship that doesn't exactly cloak, but can kind of not be seen, and also it seems like it can create like a hologram around itself to some degree to where it can look like something else. There's a lot of different abilities that we're learning about with this Section 31 ship. And overall, what they've done with Section 31 so far stylistically has been really cool. But now a couple of points about maybe where there's some, shall we say, canon problems. Okay. One is, yes, it seems, because we get, Admiral Cornwell comes back and she seems to very well know that Section 31 is a thing. Captain Pike also knows that Section 31 is, like everybody knows, Burnham knows that Section 31 is a thing. Now, of course, just because Admiral Cornwell and just because members of the Discovery know that Section 31 is a thing, I haven't exactly seen the evidence yet that the entirety of Starfleet knows that Section 31 is a thing. And here's 2 points on this, okay? One is that, well, people aboard Discovery, of course, had to know about Section 31 because they've had black badges on their ship and might be there all the time. They could be permanently stationed on there. Okay. So there's that, but that's the thing, is that Discovery's abilities and mission were also very top secret. So there's necessarily no reason to believe that all of Starfleet knows that Section 31 exists, right? Or that the Federation knows that Section 31 exists. So there's that possibility to explain how does Cornwell, and how does, how does Pike know about it? The other possibility is that at this point in time, Section 31, sure, is now a known entity. It had come out of the shadows, perhaps for the Klingon War, to provide their technology to solve the Klingon War. And this would make some sense. Because, granted, it's a different timeline, but like in the Kelvin timeline, you did have where Section 31 was preparing for a war with the Klingons. Okay. And for that very much to be a thing. Now, just with the Kelvin time, with what happened to the USS Kelvin, like we know that Discovery, just based on the year that it starts, is in technically the prime timeline. Like it can't be within the Kelvin timeline. So things are different. But basically Section 31, arguably, based upon what Admiral Marcus did in Star Trek Into Darkness, was getting ready for a Klingon War. So if a Klingon War happened, which is what happened in season 1 of Discovery, then maybe Section 31 came out of the shadows. Like, I don't think there's any part of that can really fit within. Of course, but what can happen is that Section 31, and Kurtzman has kind of hinted at this, is that like, how did Section 31 become the organization that we would know it come Deep Space Nine? Maybe events happen throughout Discovery where Section 31 has to go back underground, and that probably happens. And maybe it gets co-opted by Emperor Georgiou. We'll see. But the other thing that was a little more interesting, and I've talked about this a little bit on previous episodes of Sovryn Trek, back when it was called the Star Trek Update. That is, there is a series of books about Section 31. It's actually been running for a long time. The latest book in that series came out in, I guess maybe a year ago, and it was by David Mack, great author. And it was called Control. And it was all about this AI that effectively created or, puppeteered the Federation and Starfleet as we know it into existence. And that was like injected into all of Earth's technologies and everything. Go to Memory Beta and read up about Control, and you'll figure this out. Section 31 says it is, it takes orders from Control. I think they're referencing that AI. And if so, then, if you know the story behind David Mack's book, Control, this opens up a shit ton of great storylines. And I even said that I would love it if what was done in the Section 31 books was made public, or rather made canon, like officially canon, because I thought that book, David Mack's Control, was fantastic. I mean, even though it's not canon, or at least not exactly canon yet, I think it's a worthy read. It's totally worth checking out. And a part of me kind of wonders, because this idea of this AI that was really behind creating the Federation and so on, and making a world government on Earth. Now I'm kind of wondering if that was an idea that existed before, and that it wasn't exactly David Mack's idea, but it was an idea maybe that Brian Fuller had, or that someone at CBS was having, and they had David Mack, who has also written Discovery novels, which are canon. The Discovery novels are. That maybe they kind of got him in there, writing about it ahead of time to get people ready for this. I don't know, but I would love it. And so the idea that Section 31 is controlled by some kind of AI, I mean, that might be a reality. And maybe they have to in David Mack's Control, this AI does end up getting taken down by like Data, Lal, and Bashir, who have to outsmart it, as two of those are androids. And yes, Lal's back. Two of those are androids. And of course, Bashir is a genetically enhanced human, right? So I don't know if they're going to go with that. I don't know how that's all going to work. Okay. But like in David Mack's Control, it talks about how Section 31 only appears when it's needed, and then Control wipes it back out, and then it recreates it, and then it wipes it back out. So maybe they're going to do something like that, where that explains why, Starfleet doesn't know, or in the future, in like the Next Generation time frame, and, in the 24th century, why nobody knows about Section 31. Because, Control, the AI, wiped it out and then reintroduced it come around the time of maybe the Dominion War. Maybe that's why it needed to come back. Interesting stuff. They can do a lot with this, but so far, even with the idea that Section 31 is a known entity, again, we don't know to what extent, I am liking what they're doing with Section 31, and Michelle Yeoh is just dynamite on the screen. She is amazing. Her and Anson Mount are totally carrying this season with their acting chops and just their presence. I mean, they really, really are. I am loving the hell out of that. And, hopefully in the latest episode, the one upcoming, which is Light and Shadows, we'll finally get Spock, and we'll see, we'll get Ethan Peck's chops. Let's see what his acting chops are, which I think he has the look, but we'll see what ends up happening there. So anyway, my real complaint isn't with what's happening in the past 4 episodes. It's the speed at which it's happening. You don't get the chance to breathe, and there's some moments that really don't feel like they're earned. But overall, I do feel like this is a continued course correction for Discovery to make it more Star Trek and to help fit it more into the canon. There's even a couple of really interesting things that happen. I want to talk about this, and it was particularly in the episode with that sphere that I was talking about, that they get this, effectively this MacGuffin of this, galactic library from it. And that's an Obal for Charon. In that, a couple things happen. You get a reference to why Pike hates, was that in that one? Maybe it was anyway, one of the episodes recently, Pike makes a comment about why he hates the holographic communication system. And he says we should all go back to view screens. Now, some people have been saying, and I agree with this, that maybe what happens is that eventually Pike becomes a fleet captain. And when he becomes fleet captain, he pretty much orders, okay, everybody's going to use view screens from now on. And that's almost like a Pike initiative or a Pike directive or something like that. That he says, all right, we're all going back to view screens, and, we're not going to rely on this, holographic communication system, which that was talked about, that it had problems in, actually, was that David Mack that wrote that? Drastic Measures, I think, it was Desperate Hours. The first Star Trek Discovery book talks about this. Which that also runs into another problem where, granted, that book takes place years previous to where we are right now with Star Trek Discovery. But when Sarek asks Burnham, when's the last time you talked to Spock? She says years. Spock and Burnham do talk in that first Discovery book, which is canon. So we'll have to see how that shapes up. We'll have to see how that works. But Anyway, regardless, I still think that book is a worthy read and just a great Star Trek novel overall. So we do get reference to maybe what happens to that holographic communication system that doesn't get reintroduced until Deep Space Nine, ironically, which is also where Section 31 gets reintroduced. But also there's a moment where when they encounter the sphere, in the episode Point of Light, they run into a problem with the universal translator that is ship-wide, and everybody is talking like some other language and everybody is hearing some other language. This leads itself, and even like their control panels, the languages are wrong and they don't know what they're doing on the control panels. I don't know how many people caught this. First off, it's a brilliant little problem for a starship to have, and a unique one, it was very surprising. Like Robin was saying, it's great that Discovery can still surprise us, because this really did. But the universal translator issue, because again, by the time of the Next Generation, the universal translator is pretty much, as we understand, is built into the comm badge, right? And clearly that doesn't, or well, we don't know exactly, but I guess to some degree, maybe that doesn't work with the Section 31 comm badges. But anyway, this makes a great case for why you want controls on starships to go where it's a bunch of lights and switches and not a bunch of language and not language. Okay. Which that's exactly what we see on the Constitution class Enterprise in the original series, right? Where, there's some labeling of controls, but not really. It's a lot of lights and switches and everything that all end up doing this stuff. That if your controls were that and weren't language based, that would actually, solve the problem that if your universal translator ever goes bad, you don't end up hitting the wrong thing, or you know what you're hitting because it's not based around language. So that could be a very clever way of explaining why, come the original series, that the control panels look the way they do on the original Starship Enterprise's bridge, on NCC 1701 on that bridge. And of course in the movies and so on. So brilliant little moment there. I mean, the writers had a good day with that one because who would ever thought of that being a problem? And it ended up absolutely being a problem. So that was really cool. Anyway, we can move on from talking about these 4 episodes. Like I said, I don't have a problem with what's going on, but the pacing is way, way off and it's hurting the show. And maybe if we could binge it, it wouldn't be a problem. But, CBS All Access doesn't want to only have subscribers for 1 month out of the year or 1 or 2 months out of the year. They want them for months and months and months out of the year. So they drag this out as much as they can. So we have a season 3 coming, and if season 2, the events that are happening and kind of the re-Star Trekization of it all is going on, I'm excited for season 3, as well. I was going to get into that Midnight's Edge conversation, that we've had on both TFR on TIE Fighter Renegades, and that I've also had on patron-only Wednesday Q&As. But I think we've covered it both there. I don't know that I necessarily, maybe I'll revisit it in the future on Sovryn Trek, but for now we'll table that discussion for now because I've talked about it so much. I have not watched, just to give you a heads up, I have not at all watched the after show for Star Trek Discovery. That is a Facebook, Facebook Watch? Is that their network? That is on Facebook Watch, because fuck Facebook, for one. But for two, I thought that After Trek hurt the show. Like, there was anything that they were saying, that the actors that they had on and everything that they were doing on there, actually made season 1 a worse viewing experience. So I don't even want to see this after show. I am so uninterested because I'm afraid maybe after I would watch it, but not until season 2 is done am I going to bother watching it. So I don't really have anything to say about that other than I really don't want to watch something on Facebook anyway. Now, as far as another conversation that I want to have here, there has been, and this kind of comes out of the Midnight's Edge conversations, but there is a lot of doubt as to whether any of the shows that have been announced to come out, the Picard show, Lower Decks, which is the animated show. There's another animated series, which I think that other animated series is actually supposed to be on Nickelodeon, which is kind of weird, right? Like a Star Trek show not on CBS All Access. Doesn't that kind of defeat the point? We'll see. But then also the Section 31 show, or the Philippa, or the Emperor Georgiou show that we're supposed to be getting. Kurtzman has come out and said that the Emperor Georgiou show might not come out until after Discovery is done. But then how many seasons does Discovery have in it? 3, 4? Maybe they'll stop at 4. A lot of shows have been stopping at 4 seasons lately. So, and no pun intended there, or like any reference to the restaurant, but, but I don't know. And it would be a shame, because they're building up a great character here in season 2 for us to have to wait that long to get that show. But a lot of people are wondering if any of these shows are actually going to come into existence. Now, I think the Picard show is going to be a very real thing. And in fact, we now have confirmation that Jonathan Frakes is directing. He's been directing episodes of season 2 of Discovery. He directed episodes of season 1. He is going to be directing episodes of the Picard show, which that's got to be so much fun. And I can't wait for the production photos from that episode, to see Patrick Stewart and Jonathan Frakes together again, even if it's just in a directing role. But I mean, fuck, if you've got the guy on the set, if you got Johnny Frakes on the set, are you serious? You're not going to have him reappear as Riker? You're kidding me. Yeah, exactly. Of course. So I think it's a pretty good bet we're going to get Riker on the Picard show. But Jonathan Frakes also said, in an interview, he said that the Lower Deck show he said it's hilarious. Like, it's absolutely hilarious. Now, Jonathan Frakes is actually a very funny guy, like, personally. So I do kind of trust his sense of comedy. And so I guess I'm a little more hopeful now about this Lower Deck show, as to where I was really not interested in it at all. I'm at least willing to watch it. Granted, Jonathan Frakes could have been saying that for press, for the press, and he could have been told to say it, but, well, I'll give it a chance. It's Star Trek. What the fuck? I'll watch it, and we'll see. And maybe I'll end up being like, holy shit, actually, that was great. We'll find out. So anyway, so we do know that, but there is some theories that, maybe these shows are never even going, like a lot of these planned shows are never even going to see the light of day, and that these announcements are coming to maybe hopefully just get people watching Star Trek Discovery, and that really it's all just sort of a bait and switch that's going on. I don't think that there's evidence to support like that entire conversation. That these shows aren't going to come out. I mean, look, a lot of things do get announced all the time, and this has been true in Hollywood and the entertainment industry for as long as there's been an entertainment industry, where things get announced, oh, this is going to come out, and then it never ends up coming out, and so on. That does absolutely happen. But I don't have any evidence to say that Alex Kurtzman, or anyone else involved, Heather Caden, whoever, is purposely being like, that they're doing this, that they're bullshitting us, basically. I mean, if J.J. Abrams came out and said, oh yeah, there's going to be a Section 31 show, I would question it, because I don't trust anything that guy says, especially when it comes to Star Trek. Thank you, John Harrison. Or Khan, should I say. Wait, it's not Khan. Oh, yeah, no, it is. Anyway. So, yeah, I mean, I know that that's going around, that these shows might never actually be a thing. I don't know that I believe that. Whether or not CBS All Access is actually a hit, okay, Star Trek is still a hot property right now, and Star Wars is kind of a weak property right now. And it really is. Like, I mean, there's interesting announcements coming out for Star Wars, sure. And, we've talked about that on TFR. But yeah, Star Trek has a chance to win. They need to come out with as much as they can. And they can really, in my opinion, they can beat Disney at their own game if they keep going. So even if CBS All Access fails, fine, put it on CBS. And you can do this. Like, you can say, well, yeah, but they're showing double dicks on the Klingons, right? Klingons have 2 dicks. We know that now because of Discovery. They're showing Klingon tits. We're getting all this, uncensored content and phrasing. They're saying fuck and all this stuff on the show. How is that going to translate to network television? Well, you never have to put it on network television. Okay, for example, Stargate SG-1, one of my favorite shows of all time. That was originally on Showtime, and absolutely it was an uncensored show initially. It got bought out, come 4th, 5th season, it ended up getting bought by the Sci-Fi Channel. At the time, I think it was still the Sci-Fi Channel, it wasn't Sci-Fi yet. It ended up getting bought, and all they did was clean up the show, and just went forward, and they didn't put in that uncensored stuff. And I'm not exactly watching Discovery for, uncensored, sexy content. I mean, I'm glad it's there, but then it's not exactly the sexiest thing ever. But also, B, it's really not what comes to mind for me when I think of Star Trek Discovery. That's not what I'm there for. I'm there for Star Trek. Okay. I want that kind of stuff in Star Trek. But, if season 3 or 4 of Discovery ends up just being on, regular CBS network television, I don't think that's going to hurt things much, if at all. Okay. So, they can just clean it up and just go forward and have it on there and do their thing. And maybe put season 1 and 2 on Netflix if they really want to, because they're going to have to take on Disney Plus anyway, right? Like Netflix is the real competition against Disney Plus, which is going to be basically, if CBS All Access is Star Trek All Access, Disney Plus is going to be Star Wars Plus pretty much, maybe with some Marvel sprinkled in. So anyway, I don't see any reason why these shows aren't going to happen, but hey, maybe they won't. I don't know. I'm not going to make a claim definitively one way or the other because I'm not in charge of that shit. So, and speaking of something I'm not in charge of, it appears that, it is a fact that What We Leave Behind, the Star Trek Deep Space Nine documentary, we're going into March now. It's still, the Blu-rays have not been shipped. It still hasn't been shipped. Whatever they planned on releasing for that has not come out yet. I am not insulting Ira Stephen Burr or the production team there. I know they're doing great work. But it's a little disappointing. We were supposed to have this pretty much 3 months ago, at the latest, and it's still not here. I understand how delays work. I know what it's like. I make stuff too. I produce shit all the time. And a lot of times you run into delays. You can't avoid it. Even when money's on the line, there's times you can't avoid it. But it's still not here. As soon as it drops, as soon as I pre-ordered the Blu-ray like a year ago, as soon as it hits, you better believe I'm going to review it. I will be all over it. So anyway, I think we can wrap up this episode of Sovryn Trek. Had a long conversation around what's been going on. Because there's so much. I feel like everything that happened in season 2 so far, just in like 6 episodes, would have been the amount of events that would have occurred throughout an entire 24 episode season of The Next Generation or Deep Space Nine. It really, there's so much that happened. There was a lot to talk about there and a lot to take in. And we're going to see where all of this goes, and of course there will be, we also, speaking of things coming, we were promised some more short treks that will deal with events outside of Discovery. I did get some people asking, I had questions sent in to me asking me what do I think about the Red Angel? Right now I think anybody's guess is as good as anyone else's. I would not be surprised if the Red Angel is some kind of, they make reference, I think Ash Tyler ends up saying it, that it could have time properties like this Red Angel, or time traveling properties effectively. And I know one of the popular theories is that it's actually Spock, from the future coming back. I don't know if I believe that, but I could believe that there is someone perhaps that is trying to prevent the future that, what was his name? There was the short trek, Calypso. There was a short trek, right? Was it Calypso in that one, where there's that future where it seems like humanity is split off, Discovery's just sitting there forever, that the Red Angel is somehow related to that to keep that future from happening, because that was like in the year 3000 or something, some crazy, future. I could kind of believe that it's something to do with that. But again, anyone's guess is as good as anyone else's. I'm not going to claim I have any, special knowledge other than a time traveling theory does seem to make sense. And there does seem to be evidence for that now, but to say that it's Spock, I don't know about that. I think it'd be a lot more interesting if it was actually V'ger, because what Spock's going through right now smacks very much of what he experienced when he started detecting V'ger, when he was going through Kolinar in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. I would be far more, open to that. In fact, that would be really cool if it ended up being, the hybridization of, of Commander Decker and of Ilea. But again, anyone's theory is as good as anyone else's. Don't trust mine. I'm just tossing shit out there because you people ask me, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it because I think you need to speculate responsibly. And that speculation game is bullshit on YouTube, and so I don't want to engage in it much here. But anyway. So we'll wrap up this episode of Sovryn Trek, and we have some comic book reviews to get into next month. The Star Trek versus Transformers IDW run has has ended in February, and I can't wait to talk about all of that with you. Nice little 5-issue run that was a ton of fun, but I'll review that in depth in March. So anyway, that's it for this episode of Sovryn Trek. I will see, or what was previously the Star Trek update, I will see all of you on the other side.